I was supposed to die that week. My own son bought the ticket, packed my suitcase, and smiled while sending me to my grave. A one-way cruise paid in full, the perfect plan to make his old man disappear at sea. But I came back. And when I did, the man who thought he'd buried his father learned what real fear feels like. My name's Noah. I'm 60 years old, and this is the story of how I turned from prey into hunter. How a father's quiet love became the most human kind of revenge. If you're hearing my voice right now, hit the like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you are listening from. I want to know how far my story of betrayal and payback has traveled. And if somewhere out there, another forgotten parent is ready to stand up and take their life back. The words one-way ticket shouldn't have meant anything. But that night, they cut through the air like a blade, sharp, deliberate, and final. I was standing behind my own front door, still holding the blood pressure pills I'd forgotten, when I heard my son's voice from the living room. Calm, cold, too calm for what he was saying. "Don't worry, Allie, it's all set. He'll be gone by tomorrow night." The ship's huge accidents happen all the time at sea. Nobody questions when an old man loses his balance. It'll look natural. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. Then I heard the words again. Old man, accident, gone. That old man was me. My name is Noah Whitmore, 60 years old, retired accountant, widower, father of one, and apparently target of my own child's murder plot. 3 hours earlier, I'd been crying with happiness at my kitchen table. Ethan had driven over with that easy grin I hadn't seen since his wedding day. "Dad," he'd said, handing me a gold envelope, "you've worked too hard your whole life. Allison and I wanted to give you something special. 7 days in the Caribbean. Ocean breeze, turquoise water, total relaxation. Inside were first-class tickets, shining with promise. A dream I'd postponed for decades, because life and bills always came first. I'd told him it was too much. He said, "Nothing's too much for you, old man." And now here I was, pressed against the cool frame of my own doorway, hearing him say I was a problem to be erased. I didn't move. I couldn't. My pulse was loud in my ears, drowning out everything else. Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. "The insurance pays 200 grand. The house adds at least 3 more. Once it's settled, we're clear. We can start over." I wanted to rush in to scream, "How could you?" But I didn't. Years of discipline, years of being the calm one, the reasonable one, took over. I stood still. I breathed. I memorized every word. When the call ended, I slipped back outside like a ghost. The night was quiet, the streetlights humming faintly. I sat in my car and stared at my own reflection in the windshield. My son was planning my death, and he'd done it with the same soft voice he used to say, "Happy birthday, Dad." I thought about every sleepless night I'd spent after his mother died, working double shifts to afford his tuition at Northwestern, selling my car so he'd never have to feel poor, cooking dinner alone while pretending the silence didn't crush me. Ethan had been my whole reason for getting up every morning. The boy with the fever I rocked through endless nights. The teenager I coached through heartbreak and college rejections. The man I hugged at his wedding, proud enough to cry. How do you go from that to this? I laughed, a dry, broken sound. Then I started to plan. There was no panic, no tears, just a heavy, cold clarity. If he wanted to play dirty, he was going to learn where I got my patience and what happens when I run out of it. Back in the house, I moved quietly, pretending I'd come only for my medicine. Ethan was still on the couch, scrolling his phone like any other ordinary evening. He looked up and smiled. "Forgot your pills again, huh?" "Yeah," I said, matching his calm. "Can't go far without these," he chuckled. No hint of guilt, no tremor in his tone. The sociopath calm inherited, apparently. "Don't forget to pack light," he said. Allison's dropping you at the port in the morning. They'll treat you like royalty." I nodded. I bet they will. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after he'd gone home. The envelope lay open beside my mug. The cruise brochure glittered with paradise white beaches, blue sky happy couples. 7 days of sun. For him, 7 days to get rid of me. For me, 7 days to turn the game around. I stared at his handwriting on the envelope. To Dad with love. Something inside me twisted sharp and deep. You see, when you hit 60 people, think your story's almost over. You're slower, quieter, easier to underestimate. They forget what you've seen, what you've survived. But there's a strange freedom in being invisible. No one sees the storm until it hits. I poured myself a bourbon, opened my laptop, and began searching the ship's name, the Azure Queen. Photos of its deck's layouts, safety plans, even the number of cameras on board. If Ethan thought I'd walk blindly into his trap, he'd forgotten who taught him how to think ahead. When the clock hit midnight, I sent an email to a contact I'd kept for years. Maya Ortiz, a private investigator I once helped with an accounting mess at the community center. Subject line: urgent. Need you to look into someone. Message: my son, Ethan Whitmore. Debt, loans, insurance policies, anything you can find. Quietly, then I packed my suitcase. One half for clothes, the other half for purpose. A small recorder, my phone charger, a notebook, extra copies of my items. Evidence I thought would matter more than luggage. I lay awake until dawn. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face, that same boy who used to fall asleep on my chest, now plotting how to send my body to the bottom of the sea. At 6 a.m., Allison arrived to drive me to the port. "Morning, Dad," she chirped, her perfume sharp, rehearsed cheer in every syllable. "Ethan, so excited you finally get to relax." Relax. The word landed like a punchline to a cruel joke. We made small talk on the highway, weather, traffic, nothing human underneath. She asked if I'd remembered my medication. I smiled. "Got it right here." She didn't notice my voice shake on the word right. The port appeared on the horizon, white ship gleaming against a cloudless sky. It looked like heaven. It was supposed to be my hell. Before getting out, I turned to Allison. "Tell Ethan I'll call him tonight. Let him know how it's going." "Of course," she said sweetly. "He'll be thrilled." I bet he will, I thought. I walked toward the boarding line, the smell of salt air sharp in my nose. Families laughing, couples taking photos, everyone full of hope. I smiled too, the polite, tiered smile of an old man living a dream. Nobody noticed the storm behind it. When the attendant took my ticket, she said, "First cruise, Mr. Whitmore. First and maybe last." I answered softly. She laughed, not catching the truth. As I stepped onto the ramp, I made myself a promise. Not aloud, just in the quiet space where survival is born. "You think you know your father, Ethan. You think I'm slow, harmless, too old to fight back. But you built your plan on sand. And by the time this ship docks again, you'll understand what kind of man raised you." I straightened my back, looked at the vast blue ahead, and smiled, not with fear, but with certainty. 7 days. That's all it would take to turn his perfect scheme into his worst mistake. They say a father never stops worrying about his child. They don't mention what happens when the worry turns into suspicion. The morning I boarded the Azure Queen, the sun was merciless, that pale Miami light that makes everything look too clean, too honest. People smiled. Cameras flashed. Families waved from the docks. All I could think about was the sound of Ethan's voice the night before. "He'll be gone by tomorrow night." It replayed like a heartbeat I couldn't silence. The deck gleamed underfoot, the kind of luxury that once belonged to other men, men who didn't pawn their wedding rings to buy school books for their kids. I should have felt proud, lucky even. but pride had turned sour long ago. As I stood there pretending to admire the ship, my mind drifted back through the years. Not memories exactly, more like tiny painful film clips that played without my permission. The winter after my wife Claire died. Ethan was 12. I'd sit up nights at the kitchen table, adding up bills I couldn't pay, figuring out which one could wait until the next check. I sold my Chevy canceled cable and took freelance bookkeeping jobs for strangers just so Ethan could stay in Little River Prep, his mother's dream for him. He never knew. I wanted him to feel safe, like life could still be kind. By the time he got into Northwestern, I was working 12-hour days. I missed meals, birthdays, and one winter, I almost lost the house to foreclosure. But Ethan graduated with honors. I remember standing at that ceremony clapping until my palms stung, thinking every late night had been worth it. Funny how you can build your whole life around someone and never see the cracks until they swallow you. I started noticing small things about Ethan, years before this cruise. At first they were easy to ignore, a distant tone when he called half-hearted, love yous, quick hangs-ups before I could ask too much. Then came the canceled visits, the excuses about work. Sorry, Dad, crazy week. Maybe next time. There was always a next time. Except there never was. And Allison, she played polite, but her eyes told the truth. Cold, calculating, the kind of woman who smiled while she measured what you were worth. I remember one night, 6 months ago. I'd dropped by unannounced with a pie, her favorite kind, or so I thought. I heard them arguing before I even reached the door. Allison's voice was tight, almost panicked. We can't keep living like this, Ethan. I'm not going to drown in your father's debts. And Ethan's reply, low and bitter. They're not his debts. They're mine. He just doesn't know it yet. The argument stopped when I knocked. They opened the door with those plaster smiles, pretending nothing was wrong. That was the first time I felt the knot in my stomach, small, sharp, like a splinter you can't find. I called it worry back then. Now I call it prophecy. The truth is, I'd always made excuses for Ethan. Every lie had a reason. Every distance a justification. That's what fathers do when they love too much. They rewrite the story to protect the child, even when the child is the one holding the knife. By the time I started packing for the cruise, I was running on instinct more than trust. Old habits kicked in. Fold shirts, neatly roll the pants, pack a second toothbrush. And then, out of nowhere, my hand shook. Not fear. Just my blood pressure acting up, a small familiar reminder that time had left its signature on me. 60 isn't old enough to give up, but it's old enough to know how fragile everything is. I reached for the orange pill bottle, popped one into my palm, then realized I was out. Damn. I'd left the refill in the bathroom cabinet. That little mistake, forgetting my meds, would become my salvation. The reason I went back home. The reason I heard the truth. Sometimes I wonder if fate uses our flaws to save us. The next morning, I called a taxi instead of letting Allison drive me again. I didn't want to owe her even that much. The driver was a Cuban guy, maybe mid-30s, full of easy chatter. Cruise, huh? Lucky man, he said. Family treat you right. I almost laughed. Yeah, I said, something like that. He talked most of the ride about the heat, about how tourists tip better than locals. I let him talk. My mind was miles away, replaying Ethan's voice, the calculation behind every word. I kept seeing his face when he was 10, gap-toothed smile, arms wrapped around my neck, after his mother's funeral. He'd whispered, I'll take care of you when I'm big, Dad. Promise. Promises age like people do. Some break quietly, others shatter loud enough to wake the dead. As the taxi turned off the freeway, I caught a glimpse of the ocean. It stretched out endlessly, silver and cruel under the morning sun. I felt the smallest tremor of fear. Not for dying, I'd made my peace with mortality long ago, but for the idea that my own son wanted to hand me to it. That's when something in me changed. Fear turned into focus. The analytical part of me, the one that balanced books and spotted discrepancies for 40 years, came alive. I started thinking in numbers, timing, logistics. If Ethan had planned an accident, he'd rely on weak points. Balcony rails, late-night walks, isolated decks. Every good accountant knows risk lives in the blind spots. I'd find mine before he did. When the taxi stopped at the port, the driver helped me with my suitcase. "Enjoy your trip, old-timer. You deserve it." "Maybe I do," I said, slipping him a tip. "And maybe I'll actually enjoy it." The ship towered over the pier like a white cathedral. Families waved from the boarding line, sunlight glinting off sunglasses and camera lenses. I stood still, watching the gangway sway slightly in the breeze. My hands trembled, not from weakness this time, but from the weight of purpose. I touched the bottle of pills in my pocket, the one that had brought me back home the night before. My heart thudded once, twice, steady now. Behind me, the ocean hissed against the rocks, the sound of something ancient and unforgiving. Ethan thought he was sending an old man to sea, but I wasn't sailing toward death. I was sailing toward proof. I took a long breath, squared my shoulders, and whispered so softly no one could hear, "Let's see if you inherited anything from me after all." Then I stepped forward, my shoes clacking against the metal ramp, and boarded the ship that was supposed to be my coffin, determined to make it my battleground instead. The moment my shoes hit the ship's marble floor, I started cataloging. Old accountant's habit, I've always trusted numbers more than people. 2 cameras above the boarding gate, one near the concierge desk, another tucked between floral arrangements. By the elevators. Blind spot near the starboard stairwell, perfect for privacy. Staff uniforms, color-coded navy for security, white for service, red for maintenance. Most passengers too busy posing for photos to notice anything but themselves. I wasn't on vacation. I was walking into an experiment, and I was both subject and scientist. The cruise staff handed me a welcome drink, pink and sparkling. I smiled, didn't sip. Rule 1: never consume what you haven't opened yourself. A lifetime of caution, sharpened overnight into instinct. My cabin was on deck 8, port side, room 812. Ocean view, private balcony, the kind of luxury that suddenly felt like a cliff edge. Ethan must have chosen it carefully. Easy access to the railing, quick fall into oblivion, and the ocean would keep its secrets. I left the door open, scanning every detail. 2 exits, 1 main door, 1 balcony slider. Bathroom mirror offered a reflection angle that covered both. No hidden cameras, but I wasn't naive enough to think that meant I wasn't being watched. I set my suitcase down, but my hands didn't rest. They moved automatically. Phone charger plugged near the bed, small digital recorder hidden inside my shaving kit, another behind the bedside lamp. It wasn't paranoia. It was insurance. When you've spent 60 years being underestimated, you learn that quiet preparation is the loudest kind of rebellion. I went out to the upper deck. Families were taking selfies under the Miami sun, kids running in swimmy suits, laughter bouncing off the steel rails. Somewhere in the noise, I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. That's when I met him, Gus. He was sitting alone at a corner table near the pool bar, sipping iced tea and reading a paperback copy of The Old Man and the Sea. A thick-billed silver hair, skin leathered by years of smoke and sun. His t-shirt said, "Retired Firefighters of Phoenix." The kind of man who could spot trouble before it started and stop it if it did. He noticed me standing there, raised his drink. "You look like a man counting exits," he said. I almost laughed. Old habit. Comes with age. "Fire or finance?" he asked. "Accounting," I said. "You?" He smiled. "Fire. 40 years of it. We talked. Nothing deep, not yet. Small talk about the heat, the food, how the ocean never looks the same twice. But under that easy conversation I was studying him. Clear eyes, steady hands, the kind of calm that only comes from walking through real fire. The kind of man you could trust, or at least count on, when things got dark. When the loudspeaker announced departure, everyone clapped. I stayed quiet, watching the shoreline slide away. Miami shrank behind us, sunlight glinting off the glass towers, like a city made of knives. My phone buzzed an email. From Maya Ortiz. Got your message, Mr. Whitmore. I'll start with financials and insurance policies. Any idea what triggered this? I typed back with trembling fingers. Because my son just bought me a one-way cruise and told his wife I wouldn't be coming back. Find out who he owes money to. Dig deep. Then I locked my phone and exhaled. For the first time in hours, I didn't feel alone. Maya was smart, relentless, and discreet, the kind of investigator who could find blood under bleach. I'd met her years ago, while helping an elderly neighbor file tax forms for her abusive ex-husband. Maya had been the detective who stopped that man from taking everything she owned. Now I needed her to do the same for me, but from 600 miles of ocean away. I went back to my cabin and turned on the small TV for background noise, a habit from years of solitude. The anchor was talking about rising debt levels in the U.S., a cruel coincidence. It reminded me of Ethan's investment failures, the vague stories he'd fed me for months. When he'd said, "Dad, business is tough right now," I'd believed him. When he'd said, "Don't worry, it'll turn around soon," I'd written him checks. Every fatherly instinct in me had screamed, "Help your boy." Now those same instincts were screaming, "Survive him." A soft knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. "Evening, neighbor," said Gus, leaning in with that easy half-smile. "You dining alone?" I hesitated. "Probably, yeah." "Well," he said, "a man alone looks like a target. Company's safer." I studied his face. He wasn't joking. Maybe he'd noticed the way my eyes kept scanning corners. Maybe he recognized that look, a man expecting something to go wrong. "Dinner sounds good," I said. At the restaurant, we sat by the window. The ocean rolled endless and dark outside. Gus talked about losing his wife 2 years ago, the house too big, now the kids too busy. He'd booked this cruise because his daughter said he needed fresh air and maybe a dance or two. When he asked what brought me here, I lied. "My son's gift," I said. He thought I needed a break. "That's kind," Gus said. "Not many kids do that these days." "Yeah," I answered softly. "Not many." I excused myself halfway through dessert, claiming fatigue. Back in my cabin, I closed the blinds and checked my phone again. Another message from Maya. Preliminary results. Your son's account shows large cash withdrawals over the last 3 months. Credit card debt high. Possible link to private gambling circles. I'll confirm names soon. My stomach turned. Gambling. Of course. It explained everything. The sudden generosity, the missing calls, the desperate tone I'd overheard in Allison's voice. Debts make people dangerous. Family debts make them desperate. I scrolled through my photo gallery and stared at a picture of Ethan at his college graduation, his arm around me, his smile bright and sure. What I wouldn't give to go back to that day, before money and ambition twisted him into someone I barely recognized. But regret is a luxury for men with time. I didn't know how much I had left. I opened my notebook and wrote one line across the top of a clean page, "Turn the week into evidence." Below it, I started a list. Call logs with Ethan and Allison. Record all calls. Observe ship staff, especially those who linger near my cabin. Keep receipts, ticket copies, and any physical documents. Build timeline, debt, motive, opportunity. It was the kind of plan an old accountant would make methodical, precise, unemotional. But under it, I added one more line written in darker ink. Be unpredictable. If Ethan thought I was walking into a trap, I'd make him chase a ghost instead. I closed the notebook, set it inside the nightstand, and sat by the balcony. The ocean hissed beneath me, endless and black. A breeze lifted the curtains, whispering against my skin like a warning. Maybe it was the sea. Or maybe it was the part of me that had finally woken up, the part that refused to die quietly. I took one last look at the horizon, then whispered to Noah through no one, "You want a game, son? Let's play." But this time I'm keeping score. Trust at my age is a brittle thing. It takes a lifetime to build a sentence to destroy, and sometimes just one quiet moment to be rewarned. The next morning, I found Gus on the deck at sunrise, leaning against the rail with a cup of coffee. The light hit his face in that soft, forgiving way the dawn reserves for men who've survived too much. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked without looking at me. "Not a wink," I said. "Guess the ocean's louder than I remembered." He chuckled. "The ocean doesn't keep you awake, Noah. It just leaves you alone long enough to face what's been keeping you awake all along." There was something in his voice, a kind of weathered wisdom that made me stop pretending. So I told him not everything, but enough that I'd come on this trip under complicated circumstances, that I didn't quite trust the people who'd sent me here, and that I needed to stay alert. Gus didn't ask questions. He just nodded like a man who already knew the flavor of betrayal. "I get it," he said finally. "My brother tried to steal my pension 10 years ago. Family can cut deeper than strangers, and they know exactly where to aim." He took a sip of coffee. "Lucky for me, 40 years in the firehouse taught me two things: keep calm when the heat hits, and always know where your exits are." I smiled. "I think I've met the right man." He turned to me, serious now. "If you're in trouble, don't face it alone. The minute you feel watched or cornered, you come find me." Got it. That was the first time in days I felt like I wasn't walking this tightrope alone. After breakfast, Gus gave me a crash course in what he called invisible awareness. "Never look directly at the person you're watching," he said, demonstrating with the ease of a man used to spotting smoke before seeing flames. "Use reflections, windows, glasses, even a phone screen. People see eyes, not attention. Keep yours moving." We spent the afternoon walking the ship's decks, like two retirees killing time, but I was learning fast. How to blend in, how to eavesdrop without looking like I was trying, how to sense a presence without turning my head. By midday, the sun burned hot overhead, and the pool deck was a carnival of bodies and noise. I sat down on a lounge chair with a lemonade and a newspaper, pretending to read. Gus took the chair next to mine, tilting his hat forward. 2 o'clock, he murmured without moving his lips. "Guy in the green shirt. Been looking your way for 5 minutes straight." I turned the page of my paper, slowly catching a glimpse from the corner of my eye. Mid-40s, black hair. Too neat for a tourist. No drink, no book, no phone. Just stillness. "I see him," I said quietly. "He's not watching me," Gus added. "He's watching you." I felt the cold slide down my spine despite the heat. "Could be coincidence." Gus shook his head. "Coincidences don't stare that long." We stayed silent for a while, pretending to relax. The man eventually got up, walked toward the bar, and vanished behind a group of teenagers taking selfies. "That's your tale," Gus said. "I've seen that posture 1,000 times. Someone waiting for a signal or a mistake." My pulse drummed in my ears. "So he's part of it. Maybe. Or maybe he's just the eyes. Either way, you're not sleeping alone tonight." He said it like a command, not a suggestion. "Gus, no arguments. I've got a spare bunk. My cabin's near the stern, fewer blind corners, and I lock up tight. We'll rotate between your room and mine, so if anyone's checking where you sleep, they'll get confused. I should have resisted, but the truth was, I wanted the company. After so many years of solitude since Claire's death, since Ethan drifted away, I'd forgotten how grounding another man's presence could be. That night over dinner, I told Gus more. Not everything, but enough for him to see the shape of it. The phone call, the life insurance, the debts I suspected. His face hardened with every word. He leaned forward, voice low. Listen, Noah. If what you're saying is true, that man from the pool isn't random. He's testing your habits when you walk, when you're alone, when you're most vulnerable. He's collecting data. Like a hunter, I said. Exactly, Gus replied. So we turn you into the kind of prey that bites back. He started sketching a plan on a napkin, places on the ship where cameras covered every angle, how to vary routes, when to appear visible, when to disappear. It was all tactical, efficient, logical, the way firefighters mapped escape paths before entering a burning building. At one point, he looked up and smiled faintly. You remind me of myself when I got burned bad the first time. I stopped trusting everyone, even my own crew. But you know what saved me? What letting one person back in? Just one. You can't fight alone forever, Noah. Even lions hunt in pairs when the stakes are high. The words hit something deep. I hadn't realized how lonely my anger had become until that moment. Later that night, when I returned to my cabin to grab a few things before moving to Gus's, I found my phone buzzing on the bed. A message from Ethan. Hey Dad, just checking in. How's the cruise? Have you met anyone nice? My blood ran cold. The phrasing. Have you met anyone nice? Too casual, too specific. I showed the text to Gus when I reached his cabin. He read it once, then twice, his jaw tightening. He's probing, he said flatly. Trying to see if you're isolated or if you've got someone watching your back. How would he know that? Because he knows human nature. He's betting that guilt will make you talk, that you'll overshare. The minute you mention a name, he'll start planning around it. I sat down heavily on the edge of the bunk. He's testing my weak spots. Gus nodded. And now he knows you're not as alone as he hoped. Don't answer tonight. Let him stew. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The ship hummed softly beneath our feet, that deep mechanical rhythm you feel more than hear. I thought about the man in the green shirt, about Ethan, somewhere on dry land, waiting for news that I'd vanished, about the 1,000 miles of water between me and every safe place I'd ever known. Gus, I said quietly, why are you helping me? You don't even know me. He looked at me, then really looked and said, because once somebody helped me, when I didn't deserve it. And I swore if I ever met a man standing on the edge, I'd pull him back. There it was. The kind of loyalty you can't buy, can't fake, can't find in blood. That night, I slept in Gus's cabin, both of us taking turns half awake, listening for footsteps in the hall. When the ship creaked, he whispered normal and went back to scanning the door. Before closing my eyes, I sent a short email to Maya. Check Ethan's credit lines. Focus on gambling and private loans. Something big is driving him. Don't contact me unless it's urgent. Then I turned off the phone, tucked it under the pillow, and stared at the ceiling until sleep took me. In the darkness, I could still see the green-shirted man's eyes, steady and patient. And for the first time I understood exactly what Gus meant. Sometimes the fire doesn't kill you. It just teaches you how to see through the smoke. Morning sunlight spilled through the cabin blinds, warm and harmless, the kind of light that could almost make you forget you were living inside a nightmare. I didn't forget. I couldn't. I'd spent half the night replaying Ethan's text, wondering if he was staring at his phone somewhere, waiting for a reply that would confirm I was still naive enough to trust him. I didn't send one. Silence, I decided, was the best way to keep him guessing. At breakfast, Gus found me at the buffet. Eyes heavy, coffee untouched. "Rough night?" he asked. "Worse mornings," I said. "But I think it's time to stop guessing and start proving." He nodded. "What's the plan?" "We visit passenger services. If Ethan really bought this trip, there'll be a paper trail. And if he's hiding something, that trail's where it begins." We made our way down to deck 3, where the passenger service office sat, tucked behind glass walls and a fake orchid arrangement. Bright, polished, friendly, the kind of place that pretends to solve problems while documenting every breath you take. Exactly what I needed. The young woman at the counter wore a name tag that said Patricia and a practiced cruise line smile. "Good morning, gentlemen. How can I help you today?" "Morning," I said, keeping my tone calm. "I'd like to verify the details of my travel itinerary. My name's Noah Whitmore, cabin A212. My son arranged the trip for me, and I just want to make sure everything's in order." "Of course," she said cheerfully. Her nails clicked across the keyboard. "One moment, please." Behind her, the monitor reflected faintly off the glass wall, just enough for me to catch the color drain from her face. She hesitated. "That's strange." Gus leaned closer. "What's strange?" Patricia scrolled again, her eyes darting between lines. "You have a one-way booking, Mr. Whitmore. Departure from Miami. Arrival in Port of Nassau. No return flight listed. Normally, our cruise packages include a full round trip, unless otherwise specified." The words hit me like a slow measured punch. I knew it, but hearing it confirmed, written in black and white, attached to my name, made something inside me cave in. I swallowed hard. "Who purchased the package?" She checked the screen again. "It says here, Ethan Whitmore. Paid in full with a card ending in AU87. "That's my son," I said quietly. "Well," she said, still smiling in that professional way that didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps he planned to book the return flight later." "Perhaps," I repeated. Beside me, Gus crossed his arms. "Is there a way for Mr. Whitmore to book his own return flight, now, just to be safe?" "Certainly," Patricia said quickly, relieved to move back into routine. "Let me check availability." She typed for a few minutes, then looked up. "There's a flight from Miami to Chicago, departing Saturday at 3 p.m., the same day the cruise ends. I can reserve it for you immediately." "I'll take it," I said, pulling out my credit card before she could finish her sentence. As she processed the payment, I noticed something on the edge of her monitor, a line of small print reading, "Special request, single cabin, sea view balcony, no shared return package." It was typed in Ethan's name. He hadn't just forgotten the return flight. He'd made sure it didn't exist. Patricia printed the confirmation slip and handed it to me. "All set, Mr. Whitmore. You're lucky you checked. You're lucky you checked." The phrase stuck in my head like a nail. Luck had nothing to do with it. As we left the office, Gus exhaled slowly. "Well, there's your smoking gun." "Not yet," I said, folding the paper carefully into my notebook. "But it's a start." Back on deck, I bought a cup of black coffee and watched the horizon tilt lazily as the ship rolled with the waves. It felt surreal being surrounded by so much life, while quietly gathering proof that my own son wanted me dead. My phone buzzed. A message from Maya Ortiz. "Found something. Ethan's bank shows recent wire transfers, large round numbers, every Friday for the past 2 months. Looks like he's paying someone off. Also a lien filed against your property last quarter. Signature matches yours, but handwriting doesn't. I think he forged it." Another ping came seconds later. "There's more. He took out a short-term loan from a private lender in Chicago named Roman Blackwell, known for high-interest gambling debts." I'm digging deeper. But this isn't small money, Noah. He's drowning. I reread her words until the edges of the screen blurred. Forged my name. Used my house as collateral. That wasn't desperation, that was premeditation. The ledger of betrayal was writing itself one line at a time. I sent back a message with steady hands. Keep digging, Maya. I'll get my end covered here. I have a witness, Gus. And now a physical receipt proving the missing return ticket. Document everything. I locked the phone and leaned on the railing. Below the ocean glimmered blue, vast, indifferent. Somewhere beneath that same surface, Ethan had hoped I'd vanish. Hey, Gus said, appearing beside me. You okay? I nodded. Just thinking about how clean death looks on paper. A missing return ticket, a single occupancy room, a life insurance check, waiting at home. Simple math. He gave a low whistle. Your son's not dumb. He's just rotten. Rotten's a good word, I said softly. Rotten spreads if you let it. I spent 60 years pruning the world for him, cutting every thorn before it could scratch him. Maybe that's why he never learned pain. We stood there in silence. Around us, kids laughed. Waves slapped against the hull. Some singer crooned an old Sinatra tune from the bar. The world went on unaware that a father on deck 8 was piecing together a murder plot against himself. When I returned to my cabin, I opened my notebook and started a new section titled Evidence Log. I numbered each item. 1. One-way cruise booking, purchased by Ethan Whitmore. Verified by Patricia Passenger Services. 2. Return flight purchase. New ticket, personal payment receipt kept. 3. Bank transfers, forwarded by Investigator Ortiz. Potential payoff trail. 4. Property lien, forged signature, active legal document. Loan from Roman Blackwell, motive confirmed, gambling debts. Each entry was a small step toward survival, but also a piece of a story no parent should ever have to write. I glanced at the confirmation slip again. The words blurred for a second, before snapping back into focus. You're lucky you checked. Maybe. Or maybe I was just finally learning not to let love blind me. I closed the notebook, placed it under my pillow, and sat in the half-dark cabin, listening to the steady hum of the ship. The sound was rhythmic, mechanical, like a clock counting down. Ethan thought he'd built a perfect illusion, a generous son giving his father a dream trip. But in the cracks of that illusion, truth was bleeding through, and I intended to make sure it left a stain no one could wash away. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'd find out who the man in the green shirt really was. Tonight, I'd let the evidence breathe. Because now every document, every receipt, every whisper on this ship was no longer just proof of betrayal. It was the blueprint of my revenge. Evil never knocks. It lingers. It waits. It studies your walk, your breath, the weight of your steps. By the fourth day, I could feel it following me through the hum of the ship, the soft mechanical rhythm of danger getting closer. Gus and I spent the morning plotting. Over coffee and scrambled eggs, we spoke in the coded language of men who'd seen too much. You sure you're up for this? He asked, setting his cup down. I nodded. We can't wait for him to make the first move. We'll make him think I'm an easy one. Gus grinned, a grim, battle-hardened grin. Then we set the fire. The casino on deck 6 was perfect for the trap, crowded, loud, full of mirrors. It smelled of perfume, desperation, and lies. The kind of place where truth gets lost between the clinking of chips and the hollow laughter of people betting rent money on luck. I slipped into character, the lonely old man who'd had one drink too many, the harmless widower, trying to relive his youth on a vacation he couldn't afford. I slouched at a slot machine near the center, a half-finished cocktail beside me. Gus sat across the room, pretending to watch a poker table, hat tilted low. He'd given me a discreet mic, hidden in the collar of my shirt, His old firefighter radio trick. It recorded everything. We didn't have to wait long. The man appeared like a shadow finding its source. Same build as before, mid-40s, clean-shaven too, composed for the chaos around him. His shirt was navy this time, not green, but his eyes were unmistakable, cold, clinical, and alive with purpose. He watched me lose a few spins, then approached, smiling that predator's smile. "Excuse me, sir," he said casually. "You look like you could use a little luck." I turned, pretending to squint at him, like an old man struggling to focus. "Luck? Huh. If only I could buy some of that." I laughed too loudly, swaying slightly. He chuckled. "First cruise?" "Yeah," I said, letting my words slur just enough. "My son gave it to me. Said I needed to relax. But between you and me," I leaned closer, lowering my voice, "I hate these balconies. Heights make me nervous. I keep thinking I'll lose my balance out there, and whoosh!" I made a little hand gesture mimicking someone falling. The man smiled thinly. "That would be a tragedy." "Oh, tell me about it," I said, feigning a drunk sigh. "8th floor, cabin 2, 707. Balcony view. I can't even look down without getting dizzy." Guess my son meant well. He repeated the number like a man committing it to memory. "Cabin 707, that's right," I said, fishing another chip into the slot. "Best view on the ship, they tell me. I just wish it came with a seatbelt." He laughed politely, then patted my shoulder, a little too familiar, a little too firm. "Well, take it easy, friend. The sea has a way of taking what it wants." His words dripped with meaning. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of gamblers. I waited exactly 10 seconds before whispering, "He bit." "Copy that." Gus's voice crackled softly in my earpiece. "I've got eyes on him." Heading toward the back hallway near the restrooms, I pulled out my phone and pretended to check messages using the screen's reflection to watch him slip into a side corridor. Minutes passed. Then Gus's voice came again, lower, urgent. "He's on the phone. Can't hear everything, but I caught this. Yeah, 707. Says he's scared of the balcony." "Perfect. I'll handle it after midnight." My pulse kicked hard. After midnight. I gathered my things, left the empty glass on the machine, and made my way toward the elevator. My legs felt steady, but my chest was a war drum. Back in Gus's cabin, we reviewed the audio file from the collar mic. The man's voice came through clearly enough, deep, deliberate, with the kind of self-assurance that comes from doing bad things many times before. Gus handed me a notepad. "Write down what he said about the balcony. Exact words. It'll matter later." I wrote, "The sea has a way of taking what it wants." We both sat in silence for a moment. Gus broke it first. "That guy's not a random thug. You can smell discipline. My guess, ex-military or muscle for someone who is." I opened my laptop and checked the ship's passenger directory, a public list for social events. No name matched his face. Either he was traveling under an alias or working crewside with someone's permission. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Maya Ortiz. "You were right, Noah. Ethan's been transferring money to a man named Roman Blackwell, a predatory lender tied to illegal gambling networks. Blackwell has a record: extortion, intimidation, even a homicide charge that disappeared. He owns a private collection agency. If your stalker is working this cruise, he's probably one of Blackwell's men." I showed the text to Gus. He read it once, then muttered, "Jesus. So your son didn't just hire a killer, he went through a damn loan shark. You're not dealing with amateurs." The pieces clicked together with brutal precision. Ethan's debts, Roman's threats, the one-way cruise. This wasn't a family tragedy anymore. It was a business transaction. My life was collateral. "We have to get proof," I said. "Something that ties this man directly to Ethan or Roman." Gus nodded. We already have his voice. Now we need his phone. We spent the next hour planning. Gus would tail him again at dinner. I'd keep to public spaces visible, making sure any approach would happen where cameras could catch it. As the sunset painting the ocean red, I caught sight of the man again. Same confident stride, same hollow smile, chatting with one of the ship's bartenders. He looked up, once caught my eye, and didn't look away. That night, Gus insisted I stay in his cabin again. We double-locked the door, left the hallway light on. I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the ship sounded like a footstep. Around midnight, the soft chime of my phone lit the room. Not a call, just a notification motion alert from the hallway camera Gus had discreetly set up earlier using his GoPro. I opened the feed. The man was there, the same one, standing in the corridor outside my cabin, 707, his face half in shadow. He glanced both ways, pulled something metallic from his pocket, and crouched by the lock. My blood went ice cold. "Gus," I whispered. He was already awake, eyes on the feed. "He's going for your room," he said. "He thinks you're asleep in there." We watched in tense silence as the man fiddled with the lock, then slowly opened the door to my empty cabin. He slipped inside, closing it behind him. I reached for my phone, fingers trembling. "Do we call security?" Gus shook his head. "Not yet. Let him hang himself a little deeper." Through the small camera we saw movement, the man stepping out onto the balcony, testing the railing with both hands. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, and held it up to his ear. Even without sound, I could read the lips of a single word: "Done." He stood there for another beat, then turned off the light and left. Gus exhaled slowly. "That, my friend, was your death rehearsal." I couldn't breathe for a moment. "So tomorrow he'll come back to make it real," Gus said. "But this time we'll be ready." He reached for the GoPro, saved the recording to a backup drive, and handed it to me, like a holy relic. "This, Noah, is your life insurance policy." Outside, the waves crashed against the hull, steady and endless. Somewhere far inland, my son probably slept soundly, certain his plan was unfolding perfectly. He had no idea the prey was awake and watching. There's a sound the ocean makes before a storm, not thunder, not waves, but a hush. A kind of breath the world holds in, waiting for what comes next. That morning, the ship sounded like that. After the break-in, Gus and I didn't waste a minute. At 6 a.m., we went straight to the captain's office. We didn't bother with pleasantries. I placed the GoPro on the table like a confession. Captain Alejandro Reyes was a man built from calm and authority, late 50s, silver hair, a voice that could cut through wind. He watched the footage without speaking, his brow tightening only slightly, as the man on screen tested my balcony railing and made that silent phone call. When the video ended, he turned off the monitor, folded his hand, and looked at me. "Mr. Whitmore," he said evenly, "what you're showing me is serious. Attempted murder on international waters falls under maritime and federal law. Do you have any idea who this man is?" I nodded slowly. "Not by name. But my private investigator traced my son's financial records. He owes a man named Roman Blackwell, a loan shark. The guy in the video is one of his collectors." Reyes exhaled. "So this isn't just a personal matter. It's criminal enterprise." He stood, straightened his uniform, and said something that chilled me and comforted me all at once. "Mr. Whitmore, my ship is no one's hunting ground." Within the hour, Reyes had mobilized a quiet operation. Security officers dressed like guests were placed near my cabin, the casino, and the upper deck. 2 engineers installed a hidden camera in my hallway and a second inside my cabin. The captain wanted visual confirmation of intent, as he called it, evidence admissible beyond reasonable doubt. Gus, ever the strategist, added one more layer, a decoy. "If he thinks Noah's alone in the cabin, he'll come. But we'll be watching from the next room." Reyes agreed. Tonight's gala is perfect cover. Half the passengers will be drunk or dancing. He'll think you're vulnerable. So it was decided. I would attend the captain's gala, the black tie illusion of safety, while Gus and two plainclothes security officers stayed hidden near my door. The bait and the hook were set. That evening, as the ship glittered under chandeliers, I stood in front of the mirror in a borrowed tuxedo from the ship's boutique. I looked every bit the part, an old widower, trying to remember what joy felt like. No one would guess the truth, that I was walking into my own murder scene. The ballroom was a dream from another life. Violins, champagne sequence. Couples twirled, laughter rose and fell like the tide. Captain Reyes gave a toast about the magic of the sea, and I lifted my glass, smiling, just enough to look alive. Meanwhile, my phone vibrated once in my pocket. A single text from Gus. He's moving. Approaching 707. We're ready. I slipped away from the crowd, pretending to admire the sunset through the ballroom windows, heart hammering so loud I could hear it in my throat. The ship's cameras caught everything. The man in the dark suit, walking calmly down the corridor, glancing both ways before producing a keycard. He inserted it into the lock of my cabin. The door opened easily, just as it had the night before. But this time, he wasn't alone. The instant he stepped inside, two security officers moved from the adjoining room. Ship Security 1 barked, their badges flashing under the hall light. The man froze, then bolted for the balcony. Wrong move. Gus was waiting outside on the deck, blocking the exit with the kind of stillness only an ex-firefighter could manage. For a moment, the only sound was the wind howling against the glass. Then the man dropped whatever he was holding, a small black duffel, and raised his hands. Inside the bag they found gloves, a bottle of lubricant for the railing bolts, a wire, and a folded piece of paper. The note read, "Balcony 707. After midnight. Make it look accidental. Remove ID if possible." But the real evidence came from his phone. Captain Reyes himself arrived as security went through it. On the spot. The texts were there, plain as day. From Ethan Whitmore, "Confirm once it's done. The insurance pays fast if paperwork's clear." From Allison Whitmore, "Make sure he's alone. He's clumsy so it won't look suspicious." There were even references to my house. Ethan property signed over. Broker says once certificate's cleared, we're good. Reyes read the messages, then looked at me. His voice when it came was low and deliberate. "You have my word, Mr. Whitmore. These people won't touch you again." I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. There it was. Undeniable proof that my son had planned my death in writing. No misunderstandings, no chance at redemption. Only the quiet, precise cruelty of greed. As security cuffed the man, he spat toward the floor. "I didn't plan it," he snarled. "I'm just the muscle. You want the brains? Talk to Crane, Wesley Crane. The broker. He's the one who set the whole thing up." "Who's Crane?" Gus asked. The man sneered. "Ask your precious son. He's the one who brought him in. I just do what I'm paid to do." Reyes's eyes flicked toward me. "Wesley Crane. That name mean anything to you?" I nodded slowly. "Ethan's financial advisor. He handled my mortgage refinancing last year." Gus muttered a curse under his breath. "Jesus, Noah, it's deeper than family. They built a whole network around you." Security escorted the man below deck, his protests fading down the corridor. The ship's hum seemed louder in the silence that followed. I sank into a chair, shaking. Gus rested a hand on my shoulder, steady grounding. "You did it," he said softly. "You're alive. That's what matters." But I couldn't feel relief. Not yet. I kept staring at the printed copy of the text messages Reyes had handed me. Ethan's words, casual and cold. "Confirm once it's done." That single line broke something in me I didn't know could still break. Captain Reyes cleared his throat. Mr. Whitmore will contact Interpol and the U.S. Coast Guard before docking. By the time we reach Miami, local authorities will be waiting. I suggest you rest." I nodded, though rest felt impossible. As Gus walked me back to his cabin, I looked out through the porthole window. The ocean was black and endless, swallowing light. Somewhere out there was my son's conscience, buried deep, unreachable. I whispered to the dark water, "You wanted me gone, Ethan, but now it's you who'll disappear." Behind me, Gus said quietly, "You know what this means, don't you? The hired gun's only the beginning. The real predators wear suits." I looked down at the evidence folder in my hands, the texts, the note, the phone. "Anyways," I said, "and I intend to drag every last one of them into the light." Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, the first whisper of the storm the sea had promised. By sunrise, the ocean was calm again, deceptively calm. The kind of peace that only comes after something terrible has already happened. The hired man sat locked in the ship's holding cell. The captain's security log had his confession on video. His tools cataloged, his phone sealed in an evidence bag with my name on it. Every minute that passed felt heavier, more real. Captain Reyes called me to his office right after breakfast. Gus was with me, still running on adrenaline and black coffee. Reyes looked like he hadn't slept either. "Mr. Whitmore," he began, sliding a document across the table. "I've transmitted everything we have to U.S. authorities. The arrest footage, the texts from your son, the surveillance from your cabin corridor. Chain of custody is secure. When we dock tomorrow, Miami PD and the Coast Guard will be waiting." "Thank you," I said quietly. The words felt too small for what the man had done. He nodded once. "There's also something else you should know. Your investigator, Miss Ortiz, sent me an encrypted email about your son's finances. You might want to see it." Maya's report came in 3 pages neat, clinical, merciless. Every line peeled back another layer of betrayal. Ethan Whitmore obtained a $150,000 personal loan using your home equity line as collateral. Signature on file forged. Witnessed by one Wesley Crane, certified broker, Chicago Financial Group. Crane also filed a secondary lien through a subsidiary company called Blue Harbor Lending. Funds routed to gambling accounts and Roman Blackwell's offshore shell firm. Bank statements confirm falsified payment receipts, credit consolidation fraud, and attempted title transfer. Pattern matches intent to defraud after insured death of homeowner. I read it 3 times. Each sentence hit like a verdict. The knock came seconds later. Captain Reyes's communications officer. "Sir, Miss Ortiz is online too." I picked up the handset. "Maya." "Noah," she said, voice brisk and sharp. "I just got the lender confirmation. Crane's the pivot point. He's not just a witness. He's an accomplice. He vouched for your son's credit and processed every forged document through his firm's back end. I've already sent the files to the state attorney's office. Is he in custody?" She hesitated. "That's the problem. He's gone. Left his office yesterday afternoon. His assistant says he's traveling for the weekend. No flight manifests, no hotel bookings. He's vanished." I closed my eyes. Of course. The real criminals never wait for the sirens. "Listen," Maya continued. "When you land, I'll meet you with the detectives. We'll handle this by the book. Ethan and Allison are next." Her voice was iron. For the first time in a long time, I felt protected by something larger than luck, the system grinding into motion, cold and unstoppable. That night, back in Gus's cabin, we sat watching the horizon again. I felt older than I'd ever felt before. "You know, Gus," said, "it's strange. You spend your whole life trusting paper signatures, contracts, your own name, and then one forged line turns you into a ghost." He was right. For months, maybe years, my son had been erasing me one signature at a time. When the satellite signal steadied, I called Ethan. I wanted to hear the monster behind the mask. The ship's recorder, courtesy of Captain Reyes, captured every word. He picked up on the second ring, his voice syrup-sweet. "Dad, how's the cruise? I was worried you didn't text yesterday." "Ethan," I said evenly, "I know." He paused. "Know what I know about the one-way ticket, about the man you hired, about Roman Blackwell and Wesley Crane. I know every dirty thing you've done." The sealant stretched. Then, like a curtain lifting, his voice changed colder, flatter. "You shouldn't have gone snooping, old man. You tried to kill me. I tried to fix what you broke," he snapped. "You think it's easy carrying your debts, your mistakes. Crane told me the insurance would cover it. You'd finally do something useful." My throat tightened. "I spent my life saving you." "Yeah, well, maybe you should have saved more," he said, almost laughing. "It's funny, Dad. You think you're some kind of hero, but all you ever were was a wallet with a pulse." "Ethan," he cut me off, "you think you can stop this Crane smarter than you'll ever be. When he's done cleaning the trail, you'll just look like a senile old man cleaning wolf." The line went dead. Gus's hand was already on my shoulder. "We got it all," he said quietly. "Every word." Minutes later, Maya texted back, "Audio received. That's enough for felony conspiracy. But brace yourself. I just found something else. Allison's real estate file. She's been negotiating to sell your condo for months. Claimed she was executor of your estate. She attached a PDF of a notarized statement, Allison's handwriting, Allison's signature, dated 2 weeks before the cruise. Below it, a note from the listing agent read, "Client says, once father-in-law's estate settles, funds will clear. She says this will finally solve everything. Solve everything." That was their phrase. Like my death was a math problem. By morning, the Miami port lights shimmered on the horizon. Captain Reyes handed me a sealed folder stamped, "Chain of Custody, Evidence in Transit." Inside, copies of the text messages, the GoPro footage, the signed logs, and the recording of Ethan's call. As we docked, uniformed Coast Guard officers boarded quietly. Gus watched from the rail, while I stood beside Captain Reyes. My knees trembled, but my mind was sharp as ever. "This is the beginning of the end," Reyes said. I nodded. For them, not for me. Within hours, the case hit the legal system like a thunderclap. Maya's coordination with the district attorney produced 3 simultaneous arrest warrants. Ethan Whitmore, attempted murder, criminal conspiracy, identity theft, and mortgage fraud. Allison Whitmore, criminal conspiracy, false representation, and accessory to attempted murder. Wesley Crane, fraudulent documentation forgery, and aiding in premeditated homicide. Only Crane was missing. His accounts were frozen. His car was found at O'Hare Airport empty. His disappearance turned a family tragedy into a headline waiting to happen. That night, as I sat in the hotel, the Coast Guard arranged for me. Maya called again. "Noah, the state prosecutor, says your son and daughter-in-law will be arraigned tomorrow morning. Their attorney's already trying to negotiate. But Crane's the key. He's the one who can link the money trail to Roman Blackwell. Then we'll find him," I said. We finish what they started. Outside, the city lights flickered against the ocean, like ghosts, small, relentless, unblinking. Somewhere out there, the men who thought they could erase me were already running. But the law was awake now. And I'd learned something during that cursed cruise. Even the calmest old man can turn into a storm when you corner him. Tomorrow, the fight would move from the sea to the courtroom. And this time, I wouldn't be the hunted. When the ship docked at Miami port, the morning sun was merciless. It didn't warm, it exposed. Everything I'd survived on that floating nightmare was now about to surface under the cold, bright eye of the law. Captain Reyes stood beside me on the gangway, formal and steady as ever. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, "this is where my duty ends and yours begins." I looked out at the pier where Coast Guard officers waited with hard expressions and clean uniforms. "You saved my life, Captain." He shook his head. "No, sir. You saved your own. We just witnessed it." Detective Maya Ortiz was there, too tall in a gray blazer, her badge clipped to her belt. She offered a quick, firm handshake. "Glad to see you in one piece, Noah. You've built a case any prosecutor would envy." "I didn't want a case," I murmured. "I wanted a family." She didn't answer, just nodded with the quiet understanding of someone who's seen too many endings. Within hours, things moved like clockwork. 2 FBI agents and Miami PD officers coordinated arrests in Chicago. Maya's team handled logistics with local law enforcement. I sat in a small conference room, the air thick with stale coffee and inevitability. On the screen before me, live from Chicago PD, I watched my son and daughter-in-law led out of their home in handcuffs. Allison's face was pale, stunned. Ethan's was unreadable, the face of a man still negotiating with Daniil. They said nothing. Neither did I. The arresting officer recited the charges: attempted murder, criminal conspiracy, identity theft, and mortgage fraud. The words echoed across the small space, like the toll of a funeral bell. By noon, I was back in Chicago, escorted by 2 detectives. Maya joined me as we entered the courthouse through a side entrance to avoid reporters. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the next morning. That night, in my hotel room, I couldn't sleep. Every sound reminded me of that cruise, the hum of air conditioning, like the ship's engine, the faint creak of furniture, like the groan of waves. I sat by the window watching the skyline and wondered when love had turned into this strange, casty-food war. The courtroom smelled of wood polishes and judgment. Ethan sat at the defense table in a navy suit, hair neatly combed, hands folded like a schoolboy caught cheating. Allison beside him, mascara smudged, eyes red. The prosecutor began with evidence, cold, mechanical. Ship security reports, including surveillance footage. The detained man's phone loaded with Ethan and Allison's messages. Financial forensics from Maya Ortiz, detailing forged documents, shell accounts, and lien transfers. Passenger service logs confirming the one-way cruise ticket. Each exhibit was tagged, displayed, entered into record. The anatomy of betrayal catalogued for the world to see. When my name was called to the stand, I stood slowly. My knees felt heavier than my heart, but my voice, when I began to speak, didn't shake. "I am Noah Whitmore," I said. "I am the father of the defendant." The courtroom went still. The prosecutor nodded gently. "Mr. Whitmore, can you tell the court what you discovered on the morning you left for the cruise?" And I did. Every detail, every whisper, every wound. I told them about the phone call I overheard, the man on the ship, the text messages, the balcony that was meant to be my grave. But I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just told the truth. Because truth, I'd learned, doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand. When the prosecutor asked, "Mr. Whitmore, what do you feel toward your son today?" I paused for a long time. Then I said quietly, "I feel pity and resolve. Because if I let him escape this, if I let greed and cruelty go unpunished, then I'd be betraying every father who's ever sacrificed for his child. This isn't vengeance, it's justice. For him. For me, for every old man who was told he didn't matter anyway." You could have heard a pin drop. Across the room, Ethan finally looked at me, really looked. For a flicker of a second, I saw something behind the arrogance, fear, maybe even regret. But it came too late. The judge ruled for detention without bail. The indictment followed within hours. Formal charges on all counts. Wesley Crane's name surfaced during closing statements of the hearing. Bank records and phone metadata showed consistent calls between him and Ethan in the weeks leading to the cruise. The judge ordered a separate investigation. Crane's photos were flashed across the news that evening, with the words, "Broker vanishes amid murder conspiracy." The story was everywhere. The cruise plot case. Headlines painted Ethan as the architect of his father's near death. Talk shows debated morality and money. Neighbors left notes on my doorstep, some kind, some curious, all intrusive. Maya stopped by that evening. "You did the right thing," she told me. "Did I asked. "Because it doesn't feel like justice. It feels like burying someone twice." She sat across from me, hands folded. Justice isn't supposed to feel good. It's supposed to stop people like him from trying again. Her words settled in the room like dust, painful, necessary, true. Weeks passed. The storm quieted into paperwork and court schedules. I went back to my small house, emptier than ever, and tried to live with what remained. The silence was deafening. Then one afternoon, Maya called. "Noah," she said, "there's a support group I think you should attend. Survivors of familial abuse. They meet every Wednesday at the community center." I hesitated. "I don't think I belong there." "Yes, you do," she said. "You survived your own blood. That takes more than luck." So I went. I sat in a circle of men and women who'd been betrayed by their own children, who stole spouses, who lied siblings, who vanished with inheritance. We didn't judge each other. We just listened. When my turn came, I said only this: my son tried to kill me. But what I lost wasn't my life. It was the illusion that love is always enough. I'm still learning how to forgive without forgetting. The room was silent for a long time. Then someone whispered, "You made it. That's what matters." Weeks later, the prosecutor called to confirm the trial date. "You'll testify again, Mr. Whitmore," she said. "Your testimony will set the tone for everything that follows." I hung up and looked out my window. The late autumn sky over Chicago was gray, heavy, endless. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel small beneath it. Justice was moving slow, deliberate, inevitable. And though my heart still ached for the boy I once carried on my shoulders, I knew what had to be done. I would face him in court, not as a father pleading for love, but as a man standing for what's right. Because justice, I'd learned, isn't vengeance. It's the quiet insistence that no one, not even your own blood, has the right to decide when your story ends. When the verdict came, it didn't thunder. It didn't cheer. It landed quietly like a stone dropped into deep water. The judge's voice was calm and absolute. Ethan Whitmore, guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, conspiracy, identity theft, and mortgage fraud. Sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. Then she turned to Allison. Allison Whitmore, guilty of criminal conspiracy and accessory to attempted murder. Sentenced to 8 years. I didn't feel triumph. Just the slow uncoiling of something that had been strangling me from the inside. The courtroom murmured. Pens scratched, papers shuffled. Ethan stared straight ahead, his expression an empty mask. He didn't look at me. Not once. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe he wouldn't. Beside me, Gus exhaled softly, and Maya rested a steadying hand on my arm. "It's over," she said. "No," I whispered. "It's begun." Because justice doesn't end when a gavel falls. It starts there, in the silence that follows, when you have to decide what kind of person you'll be after the storm. Wesley Crane didn't vanish for long. Federal agents caught him 3 weeks later at a private airfield outside Phoenix, boarding a charter jet with 2 fake passports and $500,000 in cash. The headlines were brutal. Financial broker behind cruise murder plot. Arrested in fraud scheme. He was charged with document forgery, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit homicide. His empire of polished lies collapsed overnight. I followed the news, but not obsessively. By then, I'd already started letting go of the pieces that no longer belonged to me. I sold the old family home, the place where Ethan took his first steps, where his laughter once filled the rooms, and where, much later, his silence had echoed like a verdict. I didn't even pack the furniture. I sold it all, left the walls bare, and watched as the moving van pulled away. What I kept was one thing: my dignity. With the money from the sale, I bought a small apartment near the lake, 1 bedroom, a balcony facing west. The first night there, I sat watching the sunset, the same color as the Caribbean sky had been on that ship, and felt something I hadn't in months: peace. Then came purpose. Maya had been right. I did belong in that support group. But after a few months, I realized something else: we needed more than stories. We needed tools. So together we built something. The Gray Harbor Foundation, a nonprofit for older adults who had been defrauded, manipulated, or emotionally exploited by family or caregivers. Maya joined the board as legal advisor. Gus handled operations, logistics he liked to call it, still the firefighter in him. And I became the face of it. The voice. Every Thursday I stood in front of small crowds at community centers, libraries, churches. I told my story not for pity, but for warning. I talked about power of attorney, about signatures, about trust, about listening to the quiet voice inside you that says something's wrong even when love tries to translate it. I taught them how to recognize scams, how to safeguard their assets, how to speak without fear. But mostly I reminded them of something simple and sacred, that being older doesn't mean being powerless. Life began to bloom again, in small, beautiful ways. Gus convinced me to join a dance class, balance training he called it. At 66 I found myself learning swing waltz, even a bit of salsa. The first time I spun a partner across the floor, I laughed a full, unguarded laugh I hadn't heard from myself in years. Sometimes after class we'd share coffee with the younger instructors. They'd ask about the foundation, about the trial. I'd tell them bits and pieces, never the worst of it, just enough to make them listen. People think revenge is loud, I told them once. But the sweetest revenge is quiet: to live well, to help others live better, and to prove the darkness didn't win. One cold morning, almost a year after the sentencing, I received a letter. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. It read, "Dad, I've been thinking about everything. The trial, the cruise, Mom, the house. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I understand now what I destroyed. I'm sorry. Ethan." No excuses, no explanations. Just that. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in a small wooden box, and slid it into the back of a drawer. Not as closure, not as absolution, just as proof that remorse existed, even if redemption didn't. Some evenings when the lake wind carries that familiar salt scent, I step onto my balcony and close my eyes. I can still hear the hum of that ship, the whisper of the waves, the moment I first realized my son wanted me gone. But now, when I remember that moment, the one that could have ended me, I don't feel fear or rage. I feel gratitude, because it woke me up. It forced me to rebuild. And I made a promise that day, not of vengeance, but of endurance, that I'd rise again, that I'd make sure no one else would be silenced by love or fear. I kept that promise. Now, when I speak at the foundation meetings, I look out at faces like mine, weathered, kind, tired, but still burning with that small, stubborn light of survival. And I tell them, you are not too old to fight back. You are not too broken to rebuild. You are not too late to matter. And when the applause fades, I always end with the same words I whispered on that cruise the night I vowed to live. If that's how you want it, my dear, have it your way. But you'll regret it 3 times over. Only now I say it differently. Not as a curse, not as revenge, but as a reminder that a man over 50 can still rise, reclaim his life, and turn his scars into strength. Because the sweetest revenge isn't making others suffer. It's proving they never could take your soul. And if you're listening to me right now, wherever you are, remember this. It's never too late to stand tall again. You know, people say revenge is about getting even. But for me, it was never about that. It was about standing up after 60 years of silence and saying, I'm still here. I didn't win by watching my son fall. I won by learning how to live again, by helping others who've been broken and showing them they still matter. If you're over 50 and life's tried to bury you, don't you dare let it. Stand tall. Take your story back. Because dignity, that's the sweetest revenge of all. If this story reached your heart, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? And what strength helped you stand back up?